Hi, everyone. I'm Ananya Basu. I'm a director in the Pacific Department of the Asian Development Bank, and I'm very happy to welcome you to the session on green jobs, gender, and development. This year's forum focuses on the transition to clean energy. And in this session, we welcome speakers from across the world who will share their innovative projects and experiences in support of this transition. Indeed, world leaders have recognized the need for immediate action, but there is also a growing push for the transition to be just and inclusive. There is more and more media attention, research, and high-level discussions that call for a just transition, and that also recognize the need to ensure that decent work is generated, that women and marginalized groups are engaged in and can benefit equally from the transition, and where actions are environmentally sustainable and support poverty eradication. The development community has an important role in supporting governments to carefully manage the challenges and help ensure that benefits are widely shared. The speakers in this session will each give a short presentation on a case study where this is already happening. We will hear about projects that are creating green jobs, advocating for more women to be involved in the transition, and how the transition is supporting poverty alleviation in communities. Specifically, the first speaker, Tom Boschart from the Netherlands, will share a model of an integrated self-sustaining city. The second speaker, Reena Suri from India, will share her experiences on promoting and enhancing the role of women in the renewable energy sector. The third speaker is Dedi Hening from Indonesia, who will present on how women and youth have been empowered to co-design a mini off-grid PV project. And the final speaker, Angela Minas from the UK, will share findings on the livelihood impacts of a rice husk bioenergy research project conducted in a rural farming community in Myanmar. I'm very much looking forward to the presentations and discussions and hope that they will be of inspiration to all of us. I'll now hand over to Cindy Bryson to provide an overview of the session agenda and introduce the first speaker. Cindy will be moderating the session. She is a social development specialist in the Pacific Department of the Asian Development Bank, and she has extensive experience working on education and social protection projects across the Pacific, as well as on social safeguards and CSO engagement issues. Over to you, Cindy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ananya, and welcome everyone. It's going to be a really great session. We have 4 speakers, followed by a panel discussion, and then we've got some time for questions. At any time, please post your questions or your comments that you have using the Q&A icon that can be found in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. So when you post a question or a comment, they'll go directly to our producers. So please indicate who your question is for. Also include your name and where you're from. Anonymous questions or comments will also be accepted. So please indicate that in the post if you prefer to be anonymous. Our first speaker is Tom Boschart, who will present on an integrated self-sustaining city model. Tom is the founder and director of Accept Integrated Sustainability. He started the business when he was 19 years old and has been involved in more than 700 projects. He's also a recognized leader in the Netherlands in sustainability thinking. Let's welcome Tom.
Thank you, Cindy. It's lovely to be here. Thank you also, Ananya. It's wonderful to be here amongst the other speakers. And I would love to tell you a little bit about the city blueprint that we are currently developing. So let me share my screen. Here we go. So let's try to do this in 8 minutes. My name is Tom, and we are working with a team of about 20 people on a framework for a fully self-sustainable city. We believe that the time for running pilots and concepts is over, and we need to take more action to build the future of the world that we want to live in. So we've gotten together and we created a partnership of about 20 different organizations to work on the framework of what a truly self-sustaining city could look like. We're doing that with scientists and researchers, with designers and engineers, as well as with people that are working in business, stakeholder management, feasibility studies, and so on, to form from a fully multi-perspective this framework. So we're doing the research and the analysis, we're developing the strategy and the concepts, we're doing the design and the engineering and the project management to actually realize these places. We've done that in the past. For the last 20 years, we've built remarkable projects like the Salesforce Park in San Francisco, which is the world's largest ecosystem rooftop, to self-sustaining neighborhoods and food production systems that are all integrated into that process. And we've been able to do that all around the world. And we're connecting all of these places and the knowledge that arises from all these diverse cultures and perspectives into the process. We use complex systems thinking as a tool in the process to ensure that we can look a long time ahead and also to be able to connect all of these different fields from their cause and effect and to analyze the impact that we will have on future generations in the process. We've also written a book about this approach, which is fully open source and freely available for anyone who is interested to learn on how to do these kinds of projects. So Orchid City is, we're stating that we are reinventing the future of living. And why are we focusing on a city? And that is because within our sustainability challenge, we have many different areas that come together. Of course, we have climate change with our carbon footprint, extreme weather events and sea level rise. We have ecosystems and biodiversity that is threatening our agriculture. We need to deal with species extinction and habitat loss. The research shortages that we're facing in some of our most primary resources. The economic resilience that we're hoping to build, including sustainable jobs and equitable finance, as well as the infrastructure that's necessary for this. And the social challenges that we have, including quality education, affordable housing, accessibility, diversity, and as well aging population in many areas of the world. In the built environment, all of these things come together. The city really is the hotbed of the combination of these challenges. And that's why we are focusing on building this inclusive, self-sustaining city model that allows us to tackle all of these areas at once rather than one by one. The Orchid City model really is a living environment. So we have housing, of course, but we also have the full program of everything that is necessary on a weekly basis within walking distance. So that includes learning and education, the production of agriculture and durable consumer goods, entertainment, and working, providing just as many jobs as the people who live there require. We're building this with a big international consortium of experts, from engineers to finance specialists, and from software developers to marketeers, to ensure that we put down a proper foundation that has covered every aspect of the challenge. One of the real important aspects here is that, yes, we are building, if you will, a visionary future city, but we're aiming for it to be realistic and feasible and most of all, affordable. So this is not a high-tech project that is only for a segment of the population. We want to make sure that we include everyone who works and lives in a city from all walks of life, from all walks of background and diversity, and to make it affordable as a realistic, normal living environment. So what we're doing for that is we are combining aspects from the autonomy realm, how we define sustainability, to be self-sufficient fully in its food production. That includes many different ways of producing food and different food types, water and energy, and all of the daily services, including things like healthcare, education, entertainment, social connectivity, and so on. We have the harmony aspects, which include the diversity of the offering for housing and jobs and policies to make sure that we're inclusive, to make sure that it's affordable, and the resilience aspects, being climate adaptive, to be regenerative in its natural aspects, and to be generation proof over time as the city develops. And that's really the aspects that create that sustainable city. On the background, on an energy and material level, we're connecting and reconnecting in a circular way all of the essential resources based on ecosystems services. So we are energy self-sufficient, water self-sufficient, food self-sufficient, and we have these durable consumer goods like construction materials, textiles, and ceramics, all within one circular model. Each one of these parts have already been proven. We are just bringing them together in a new way. The model allows itself to be scaled, so we can go from a small community of 500 inhabitants up to 15 or even 50,000 in population, and we can model this quantitatively and have ready feasibility studies within just a few months to help the developers to make this a realistic, affordable investment project. We're developing software to connect all these aspects together. Let me speed up a little bit. Based on regenerative nature and food production, really about 80% of the location is nature. To rediscover happiness and well-being in the process by connecting also generations across the board to allow elderly and young people to have new roles within the society that they inhabited, and to reimagine the work and living relationship, so that working becomes, again, a part of what we want to do with our life rather than just something that we have to do. We have developed pilot models in the Netherlands, Vietnam, and Brazil, and are currently focusing on Vietnam as the first place to execute the first project, for which we've developed different concepts that are also climate and flood preventative. So we are combining high density urban living with rural agricultural populations and connecting them together. The high density areas will look something like this. So you see it's mostly car free, walkable distances, very much embedded within nature. And the agricultural areas and the agricultural living will have this kind of nature, which is also lovely for relaxation and tourism. So as an effect, we will be saving 140% of CO2 footprint per person, which means that these cities actually sink carbon back rather than emit it. We have 100% of the required food production across diets. We have jobs and education for the full diversity of the population, including all the educational components. We are contributing enormously to the economy every year and regenerating land and water bodies by reboosting biodiversity in the process. So we're currently in phase 1. We have the research and framework development complete. We're currently engaging investors and grantees to invest in phase 2, where we are already looking for locations here in Vietnam to secure the first development of the project. So that's what we want to do, realize how we want to live tomorrow, today. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the really excellent presentation. Our speakers are limited to just 8 minutes, but we will have further time to hear more from Tom and really this sort of inspirational way of living. I love it. I'm going to introduce now the next speaker. Remember that to post your Q&A for Tom and for any of the speakers using the icon in the top right-hand corner. Our next speaker is Reena Suri, who will present on enhancing the engagement of women in the energy sector. Reena is the Executive Director of India Smart Grid Forum. She has 21 years of experience in the energy sector and has been involved in various research, advisory and advocacy reports. She's also the founder editor of the Smart Grid Bulletin. Let's welcome Reena.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and a very good morning, good afternoon and good evening to all speakers and the participants who are attending this program from around the world. Thank you, Asia Clean Energy Forum, for having me here as part of this esteemed panel. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to be here. I've been working in the energy sector for over 21 years now, and have seen the sector transition from the traditional grids to smarter grids. But energy sector still remains the least gender diverse sector worldwide. And closing this gender gap will be vital as women are key drivers to innovation and inclusive solutions. Globally, we have seen that women make about 48% of the workforce. But in case of traditional energy realm, we have women representation of about 22%, with only 14% women in leadership roles. Women and energy have a synergistic bidirectional role, and they can be key players in the rapidly expanding energy space. And the renewable energy sector itself can play a crucial role in increasing women's participation in the growing economy. Next slide, please. So the clean energy transition, as we have seen, it requires us not only to radically reform the existing energy supply and energy system, but also go beyond replacing the fossil to clean sources. And it will require innovative solutions and business models to be adopted, change in behavior innovations in supply, delivery, and usage of electricity, as well as greater participation from the diverse talent pool that we have. So going forward with this clean energy transition, it is expected that energy sector will require around 1 million people by 2030 or more. The power sector must mobilize and retain the talented women professionals to meet this talent pool gap, and it is required to accelerate. That is required to accelerate the clean energy transition. And at present, women account for an estimated 1.1% of the workforce that the renewable energy sector, particularly if we talk about India, is facing. And whereas global average stands at for about 32% women participation in renewable energy sector in India and in India alone. So therefore, the power sector must mobilize and retain the talented women professionals to meet the talent pool required to accelerate the clean energy transition. Next slide, please. So this clean energy revolution that we are witnessing, as per a report published by International Energy Agency, almost 290 gigawatt of new renewable power was added to the power system globally in 2021, and which is 3% higher than the record capacity addition achieved in 2020. This trend is irreversible. And also the cost of power for renewable energy and has come down over the years, and and it's become so low that no fossil fuel based resource can anymore compete with renewable energy. So even as renewable energy takes center stage in the energy transition, women are still underrepresented in the sector. And the global surveys conducted by IRENA indicated that women representation is only about 32%. Am I audible? Okay. Both are considerably below the level of women's participation in the overall economy's workforce, which is close to 44%. So the gender inequality is most evident at this decision-making levels. And across the economy, the overall number of women on company boards and in senior management positions is painfully low, as is true in the policy making and governance. So the absence of female role models is even more acute in the energy-related fields overall. Their leadership and contribution is very much required, and it will play a crucial role in ensuring that the future energy systems address the needs of modern societies, take on the challenges of climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic, and leave no one behind. Next slide, please. So as I've mentioned, that the energy sector remains one of the least gender diverse sectors worldwide, and is closing this gender gap will be vital, as women are key drivers of innovative and inclusive solutions. So to enhance the role of women in the energy transition, there are some few steps that I have mentioned, which needs to be taken. For example, propagation of STEM education and women participation in STEM-related jobs. So about 43% women in India have opted for STEM-related education compared to 38% in UK and 34% in US. And in India, a substantial number of women opt for the STEM education and related jobs. But fewer in reality climb up the corporate ladder to senior management roles where the women's talents are utilized best. And educational policy towards encouraging women in STEM education will create a sizable number of technical women workforce in green jobs. Going forward, competency as a change enabler for breaking the gender stereotype. The stereotype emerges from creating job roles which are predominantly favoring men and affecting women, which from the social culture, women facing social cultural biases that restricts women's expression, ability to onboard to new opportunities and freedom. And skilling and upskilling is the key to mitigate the dearth of talent pool that is required for this energy transition. Moving from the traditional coal-based economy to lower carbon economy, it presents a lot of challenges. And from the policy development and to availability of the market-enabled technology. And it is highly pertinent to invest in competency-based vocational training with the latest technologies and create a diverse talent pool. And having gender-sensitive policies for holistic workforce development is really important for creating a better work culture for having women in the leadership roles and working in the sector. And lastly, support ecosystem mentoring and role modeling for growth of women workforce. So most women are juggling between the work-life balance and numerous other challenges. And in this regard, policies towards childcare, maternity, sanitization facilities, etc., will really help bringing the gender balance that is missing in the energy transition. So lastly, I would like to reiterate that a clean energy transition will require innovative solutions and business models to be adopted, and greater participation from a diverse talent pool is required. The need is women-centric implementable policy framework in the evolving clean energy sector to bridge the gender diversity and increase participation of women in leadership roles. Thank you so much, and over to you, Cindy.
Thank you so much, Reena. Now, next speaker is Didi Henning, who present on a mini-grid PV system and the involvement of women and young people. Didi has more than 10 years of experience in rural electrification and is currently managing a demonstration project in Indonesia. He is one of the founders of a networking body called Women in Mining and Energy Indonesia, and a startup focusing on supporting off-grid communities secure access to green energy. Over to you, Didi.
Thank you, Cindy. Good morning, everyone. My presentation today is very practical. I'd like to present the ongoing projects in Sumba in Indonesia, in empowering women, youth, and marginalized groups to basically co-design and take part in energy facilities that we built in Sumba. A little bit about Mentari. I'm currently working as a demonstration project for a UK-Indonesia project named Mentari. It's a 4-year project, start from 2020 to 2023, in helping the government to achieve low carbon energy transition in Indonesia. A little bit about the context of the project. The project is now running in one tiny village in Sumba Island in East Nusa Tenggara. And a little bit about this village, this data essentially shows that majority of the community are farmers, and nearly half of the community only completed elementary schools. And quite large number also have no education. The community members, however, some of them have some business skills. That means they running small-scale businesses, around 50 of them. And 80% of the total community of around 1,000 household members are women household headed. And around 65% of the houses during the survey identify their energy demand to falls under tier 2 of ISMAP framework. When we segregate the data, we learned that more women has no education or drop out from primary school compared to their counterpart, and more women household headed also falls under wealth group 1 or the lowest. The wealth group classification is a wealth framework that we use in the projects, reflecting from almost 10 years working in Sumba. I put it on the annex for perusal, but it focused on asset ownership between men and women, also liquidity of assets. A little bit more about this data also tells us that this data and the next slides correspond with literatures that the rural economy in this part of Indonesia is mainly subsistence based with limited cash availability. As appear from the graph that majority of the community work as farmer, seasonal, and larger number of them receive government assistance. The government assistance mostly accessed by women-headed household, and quite large of this community, 80% of them actually receiving in-kind and also cash assistance through government projects. Interesting about this village, when we do the study, they mentioned that they also have another additional season called hunger season, falls between October and December. That's also mean they have limited food stock and also limited liquidity. So reflecting from the baseline, we designed 3 tools. We want to have a gender and inclusion plan. So we do thoroughly gender and inclusion study. We do gender safety assessment, also knowing from the baseline that the women in the village also experience quite large number of violence. And also we do local capacity assessment to assess existing capacity in the region to support the project. And we come up with the gender and inclusion plan, provide the budget, and also gender action learning tools that we design in 3 phases, start from understanding the gender role and taking to the next level into entrepreneurship skills. And then the more advanced one is focused on how to mobilize women and also to advocate at the village or at the subnational level. And through this baseline also we design a few trainings that reflected into their needs, especially women and marginalized group, and also to ensure that they will have opportunity to take part in the training. We also develop what we call gender safety tools. This is some of the tools that we use. Women and also youth and marginalized groups have a map of their village, and then they come up with areas that they feel like they feel less secure, or especially at night. And this reflected back into our PV design, in which we provide solar street lights in this region. Also, we ask them to map the resources that they usually access during the night, such as water, or even where they keep their cattle. And that's reflecting back to our design as well in developing the streetlights. And also we understand a little bit better about their livelihood calendar mapping. And this help us to develop what we call productive use of energy, to make sure that women and also youth and marginalized group have access to productive use of energy to improve their livelihood in general. So the strategy is more of, the strategy that we use is more of pull information instead of pushing the information to the community at the pre-planning phase. For the training, we focus much on youth because we learned that youth in this village have less opportunity. Normally, they will marry young after finished high school. So we work closely with a local vocational school. Why we work with local vocational school? Because we also want to strengthen in the local school. And we combine in class, hands-on, and also visit to existing infrastructure. Luckily, in the village, they already have solar water pumps, so we use them as a test bed for the kids as well. And nearby village also have mini grid. We use this village to run inspection with them. Not only running the training, the advantage of working with this vocational school is that they eventually get certification, national certification that they can use for their future career as well. Gender action learning, why we use these tools? Because it use drawing instead of like in class activities. So women will have more freedom to draw about their livelihood, about their challenge in the community, and this also will be reflected in the class of women. Inclusive recruitment, also we want to make sure that we recruit enough women and girls because we learned that not many of them are graduated from senior high school. So we run a proper and sort of like a modified interview and also recruitment to allow more women and young girls to access the training and also job opportunities. We also do what we call mini-grid knowledge through gamifications. We work with local entity that develop games to deliver to the community on like a piloting on how they use the appliance and how that affects the mini-grid performance in general, and also to make sure that they understand how much money they will pay eventually if they use certain appliances. The key learnings are quite few that are listed here. We learned that early engagement is very important, but we also learned from if you see it from the blue table here, that the breakdown of women participations are quite high on specific activities, but at some points, at some activities are quite low. So we are in general also learned that if the activities involve like a formal meetings, involve government, involve high-level officials, women also less likely to attend. This is something that we learned in the projects. We also learned that it's important to strengthening the local women's network in the community to support the sustainability of the projects and training and provide certifications. We also make sure that all the partners that we're working with understand and adopt the gender and inclusion framework. That's including the vocational school. The remaining three learning that we also learned so far is to consistently advocate the government and also all partners to make sure that when we are actually using government guidelines in recruitments, we make sure that the government understand that their regulations are not usually not very inclusive. So involve them in this process also will help them to hopefully in the future revise the regulation. And also leveraging other projects or also program in our network, including water and sanitation and education, providing ICT, information technology and computer training. And lastly is to make sure that the knowledge stay within the village and within the community, institutionalizing the knowledge through the network. These are the references that you can access. And by saying that, that's my presentation. Thank you very much. Back to you, Sydney.
Thank you very much, Didi. Yeah, I mean, that was just such a great example of really inclusive energy projects. And I think we're also going to hear more about that from our next speaker, who is our final speaker for today. It is Angela Minas, and she'll share the results from a husk to energy research project in Myanmar. Angela is a social scientist in the field of agriculture and low carbon energy. She's based at the Tyndall Centre for Climate Change Research. Please remember to keep your questions and your comments coming in by using the Q&A icon in the top right-hand corner. And I'm going to hand over to Angela for her presentation.
Thank you, Cindy, and good morning to everyone. So for this presentation, what I'd like to do is to reflect on the lessons that we learned when we did this collaborative project in Myanmar. On the outset, we wanted to look into energy access in agriculture. But in the process of doing that, and this is our first reflection, that when you look at energy access, it's almost impossible to link energy to poverty, to power, to climate vulnerability. And we reflect on that, as Cindy has mentioned, from our project on rice husk bioenergy in Myanmar. Just to give you a bit of a background, we are interested to look at the agriculture side because Myanmar is an agricultural country. 50% of Myanmar's population is employed in agriculture. And even though there are challenges in terms of infrastructure, facilities, and farming practices, it is the 6th largest rice producing country in the world. So the idea is with access to energy or improved access to energy, this could open opportunities for optimizing production and increasing efficiency in terms of agricultural mechanization, high quality drying and milling, and value added processing of rice-based products. From an energy perspective, Myanmar uses a lot of biofuels, of biomass. More than 60% of energy comes from that. The challenge is majority comes from traditional biomass, and that means firewood for burning. And that would not be ideal from a pollution perspective, from a climate change perspective. And so we wanted to look at the potential for bioenergy, for modern bioenergy to be used in Myanmar. Additionally, as an agricultural country, rice husk is, there's tons of it that's produced every year. So 13 million tons every year, and that could result to 3.6 million tons of rice husk that can be generated for energy. They are using some of it already for energy generation, but a lot of it still gets thrown off the river systems. So again, there's a lot of potential, but there are also challenges in place. So when we set out to do our collaborative research project, we have this question on how can value-added activities such as generating energy from rice husk benefit agricultural livelihoods, agricultural production, and improve rural livelihoods? We went to Ayeyarwady region, to villages in the Buta. These are both agricultural. These areas are both rice farming areas, rather, and they have a variety of livelihood activities. Interestingly, these areas they've also experienced impact of climate disasters. So when we were doing the interviews, even more than 10 years after, the locals still recall those impacts. And so it is a vulnerable area from that perspective, but it has lots of potential from a livelihoods perspective. So we sat down with the locals, with the villagers, and we asked them what their value chain activities are, who they interact with, what do they do from production to when it goes to the market, and what are the challenges that they face. We did a series of group discussions and we did the mapping. And these are some of the lessons that we learned from the field. Of course, we found challenges. And mainly, at least one of those that emerged is the access to credit and financing. The farmers are in a debt cycle, and that came out as one of the most urgent needs of smallholder farmers. So they would receive the loan from the development bank, for example, but that puts them, they don't always arrive early, etc. And so that means it limits their livelihood activities. Similarly, small-scale millers also need financial and technical support to upgrade their facilities. And that leads me to the second reflection point, which is if we are planning to link agriculture and energy access, we know that already on the outset that it is complex, but it's made more complex by financial challenges that need to be addressed first or in parallel. Another challenge that we understood from the field is on the potential of rice husk market. It exists. So this photo here is a rice briquette. So there are value-added activities that are happening in the area. However, this is still burnt. So again, from pollution perspective and health perspective of the locals, burning biomass is not the ideal solution. We were thinking maybe more towards the modern bioenergy solutions. And so there's a rice market, but mostly for traditional biomass use. When it comes to medium-scale millers who are processing all these rice husk briquettes, they are willing to participate in a rice husk to bioenergy activity, but they are interested only if other actors or businesses can manage rice husk collection and transportation for them. And so this leads us to think that, of course, market structures will need to change. And when market structures change, there will definitely be an alteration of power and empowerment based on the capacities of the people, based on the capacities of the actors that are involved. But we also found a number of opportunities. So as I've mentioned earlier, for example, medium-scale millers, they are already in business with other local actors in the market. So for example, a rice noodles business would get in touch with the medium-scale miller. They would get the rice husk from there and use that for their energy use. So building or strengthening that connection would be essential. We also know that there are already rice husk used in energy generation. In the two villages, they are powered by partnerships. One is a community managed partnership in Bitut. The other one in Kambet is private and local business partnership. So there is a market that exists, but the market development for this needs to be supported. And in doing those, in supporting this market development, we realize the need to empower locals to manage the husk to energy business models. The other thing is to link farmers to service providers to lower the cost of production. Just going back to the first point earlier on challenges in terms of accessing financing, it's linked to agricultural services that they need to access but couldn't to some extent because of the cost. And so we found that gap and the need and opportunity to link farmers to service providers. So going back to our basically the key thing that we wanted to answer, we thought, okay, perhaps if we are to bridge agricultural livelihoods and energy access, farmers and millers definitely need access to credit under fair financing schemes. There should be investments and support towards facilities and activities that add value to rice husk, especially if it were to be used for modern bioenergy solutions. Supporting community partnerships via capacity building and policy focus on rice husk and bioenergy. But when you were doing all these conversations and discussions with the locals, there was there was a great interest on support from NGOs. A lot of NGOs, and so one of the partners in this project that we did is also an NGO. There's a tendency to rely or to expect support from them, but reliance on NGOs, we know, not just in this context but everywhere else, it's not sustainable for the long term. There definitely needs to be a role for policies, for institutions, and also for locals to be recognized that they have agency and capacity, and these need to be acknowledged. So just to bring it all back just to summarize a bit on one of the lessons and reflections that we've learned from this project is that if agriculture or access to energy can genuinely serve agricultural livelihoods and contribute to poverty alleviation and resilience building, it has to build upon addressing communities' immediate needs and use them to enhance existing capacities within communities. We don't want for energy access, for example, to put people into more poverty, for example. So it is a complex process, and we realize that even more on this project. And hopefully later on in the discussions, we can talk together and discuss on potential solutions and how that is, and learning from other speakers as well in this session. Thank you, Cindy, and I think that's it for me.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Angela, and all of the speakers so far. We've had 4 really excellent presentations, and I hope they've been an inspiration to all those who have participated so far. We now have a panel discussion where I'll ask each a question. And I guess given the time constraints, I'm going to jump straight in, and I'll go in order of the presentation. So Tom, you're going to be first. I guess I'm really fascinated by the model city, and can I leapfrog into the future and kind of live there now? I would be very happy to. But I guess in terms of the use of renewable energy systems and other sustainable features within the Orchid City model, how can aspects of this design thinking be replicated, I guess, cost effectively in like small communities and in developing countries?
Yeah, that is a good question. What we've been developing with the blueprint is really a new way how we connect things that already exist and get more benefits from that. So if we look at doing things the normal way and then adding technology on top of that to increase the sustainability performance, we're actually missing out on opportunities that we can gain from things like ecosystem services and social reconnectivity by actually reorienting and doing things in a very fundamentally different way. So what we're doing with Orchid City is actually, it doesn't use any particularly new technologies at all. Everything that's used is already proven for decades, but we are trying, by combining the ecosystem services in the living environment, we can do things like using phytoremediation, like constructed wetlands, to do wastewater treatment instead of heavy pumps and filters that require energy and maintenance. That's just an example of how using it in a fundamentally different way allows also for opportunities to retrofit these things into rural communities. And I think one of the important things is what we are trying to do also is with the scalability of it, to basically start from about a population of about 500 people, which is for some services to be viable. And you can still implement a lot of its fundamental ideas into smaller communities even. But one of the most important things is that it's great to have and cater for living and housing, but creating jobs within rural communities is absolutely essential, because that is the only way we can stop the increasing urbanization of the larger cities and the drainage of the rural communities from talented and ambitious people and younger generations, is by providing meaningful jobs. And by doing so, and also having production included within the model that also allows for renewable energy technologies to be implemented on a town level. And so all of these things start working with each other if you look at it in that way. And I think that that's one of the ways, that's why we're focusing on Vietnam. This is not an easy place to do this. It would be better and easier in the Netherlands, where we're from. But we want this to be a viable model for all kinds of different contexts around the world. And that's why we're doing it here first, to also replicate it in other places that have similar challenges.
Thanks, Tom. Just quickly, a really quick response on this. Is it most sort of adaptable for a greenfield site? Like, can you use some of your design thinking within sort of existing, I guess, rural villages or perhaps even more urban areas?
Yeah, it is quite adaptive. We are actually looking forward to use it as an adaptive regeneration method that can be applied to existing places, but it does require some level of new construction and some level of reorientation, especially concerning the agricultural and natural regenerative systems. Requires a different form of farming, a different form of community building, a different business model, but it can definitely use existing structures, which we mostly have used in the past. Like, our office here, which is an old, classic factory, we always regenerate existing places. So it's about 70% existing, 30% new. That's about the edge that we can work with.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Well, I hope others can ask Tom some questions in the Q&A. I'm going to jump to Rena now. And Rena, you presented some, some unsettling statistics about the roles of women and that they have in the energy sector. I guess I'd like to hear from you about what might be the effective actions that private energy companies can implement to get more women in positions of management specifically. Thanks.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, so there's a lot that, the energy companies are doing in this space, and the gender inclusive workflows, they understand is the key pillar to a sustainable organization culture. So they are working towards revisiting and upgrading their gender policies and implement some parental policies, develop return to work schemes, including retraining and giving flexible working hours to women with young children, and creating a no tolerance, kind of a campaign for sexual harassment and discrimination, and ensuring that it is enforced in the organization. And also, if in a managerial position, support and a promotion, promoting the competent individuals, and aiming so ensuring that at the leadership level they have diversity, and also skilling as reskilling, as I mentioned, conducting workshops, trainings, mentorship programs targeted towards women folks, and providing ensuring that the trainings are gender sensitive, and are also addressing in the large group, they're addressing the gender related issues, so that training it helps inform and guide the employees on appropriate ways of addressing and interacting with the other side, the colleagues. So breaking this gender stereotyping by having the gender neutral, also very important issue that we have come across is having the the gender neutral job descriptions in place to make it women friendly. And also gender diversity, as I mentioned, at the leadership team, which benefits the organization by increasing the employee retention and employee engagement going forward. So ISTF, we have been working together with different stakeholders on a single platform, bringing policymakers, government officials, industry, power distribution companies all together, And we have been conducting a number of outreach activities to influence, having the right policies and ecosystem in place. And also, we've recently hosted a national launch of and technical sessions for a forum called V-Power, which is at the India chapter for V-Power, which is in partnership with World Bank and Asian Development Bank. So these kind of forums are also helping, create the right ecosystem in place and educating and ensuring that the energy companies have the right policies and, implementable programs in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Rina. Just a quick follow-up. What is your thoughts about quotas or targets, and whether management or board should put in place a target for a percentage of women in those roles?
So ideally, having a diverse pool of workforce at the leadership level, definitely it helps having a balance of ideas and innovations in place. So this at least 50-50 balance is something we are looking forward to. And in India, I've been working for so many years, and it's been several times that I'm the only woman sitting in the forum, and a lot of panels also that you see in different conferences and platforms where you see it's all male dominated. So, but definitely things are changing. We have seen a big transition already in the last couple of years. And going forward, we are looking forward to an absolute neutral environment where we have, a balance of male and female working together and, working towards this big transition that we are looking forward to.
Thank you, Rina. Okay, we're going to go to Didi now. I think it was just really good to learn about the process and some of the tools that you've used. How can the results be scaled up so that women's involvement in particularly mini-grids within communities can become the norm?
Sure. I think one of the strategy, I agree with Rina mentioned before, that within the project, we want to make sure that women are taking the role in the solar PV management. And we also putting the target, at least 50% are women. We learned that if you put the target lower than 50%, like even if it's 30, you're likely to get lower than that anyway. So might as well put higher number or almost equal number, 50%. Then you will try for bigger result. And also we learned from previous study or also 10 years of developing mini grids in Indonesia that the likelihood for mini grid to succeeded and also to thrive is what happened when women taking part in the solar PV management. And also that because women are more diligent, we believe, in running the business model in the PV management. Start early, so that's become norm. People involved with the village management, because the nature of Indonesian decentralization system somehow, I believe, strengthening men positioning even until when you reach the village level. So most of the people who sitting on the management are men anyway. So start engage them. They will learn that any process that we take in the village doesn't necessarily have to follow the regulations, because very often the regulations are not gender sensitive. So by reflecting from the experience, we are hoping that become norms in their next process. And then I think the second one is to make sure that we strengthening the women's networks in the village. Usually you find so many women's networks, they are inactive. If it's entrepreneurship, try to engage them and linkage with the market players through introduce them to social entrepreneurship, through working to support demand incentivizations in the PV mini grid. We know that most of the PV mini grid many grids struggling to utilize their load during the day. So we work with market players to support women groups to utilize the dump load during the day. And that direct business to business is actually strengthening women's confidence and also strengthening their business in general. And I think the last one is to work with vocational schools, because we also learned that a lot of budgets from the village management or even within the other subnational governments are dedicated for trainings, but many of these only reach the male. So when we're working with vocational school, they adopt the gender and inclusion. They are more likely to encourage their client to send women or even young girls to the training as well. I think these are the three things that we learned so far.
Thank you, Didi. But quick follow-up question or two. You mentioned that they had trouble using up the load during the day, and then you worked with them on some activities. What were they?
Yes, it's pretty much the same with the presentation from Myanmar. I forgot. So we actually, apart from many of the mini grid developers only do the study on supply side, we are taking ahead by looking at the demand side as well and making sure. And we learned that actually to many of the activities, business activities are actually driven by women, whether that rice mills, whether that any technology that involve freezing, agriculture product especially. Those are actually potential productive use that can drive the energy during the day. So because we are working through PV mini grid and the battery, we don't want to disrupt the battery. So we allow at certain times for women and businesses to access more energy during the day.
And then another quick follow-up question, if possible.
Yes.
Your presentation had some startling figures about the low levels of literacy in the communities. And I saw in your photographs that you used a lot of visuals. Can you talk through, because you did a lot of really good engagement activities, can you talk through some of the methodology there?
Sure. Yeah. So we at the beginning we ran a very quick study, just like a baseline study and also a feasibility study. But we learned that because many of the women are illiterate, most of our respondents are male. So that struck us, and we then developed another study focused on women, and they are very shy. So and also reflecting from Heifa's experience in Sumba, it's much easier to engage them through figures, to drawings or songs and stuff like that. Even when you ask them about any violence that they experience, it's very difficult for them to tell about it in presentation or in class. So we need to ask them to visualize that and then understand that together. We use what we call gender action learning. I put it on the reference as well. It has 3 stages. The first stage is to make sure that women understand the gender role within their family. And then second stage is to make sure that they understand how to use the energy for productive use and to income generating activities. And then third one, it's more advanced one, to make sure that they understand that it is important to have a active women network to advocate for their needs at the village level and other subnational level.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And then last we go to Angela. My question for you is, if someone in the session wanted to start a similar rice husk bioenergy project, perhaps in another rural community in Myanmar or another country, what would be your words of advice regarding the process, the financing, the stakeholders that need to be involved?
So what we say, or at least like what we learned from doing work in this field, not just in Myanmar, but in other areas, in other rural areas, at least in Southeast Asia, is at least do not leave the farmers in the local communities as an afterthought of your project. More often than not, when development agencies, when funding agencies, when NGOs come to rural areas, they come with their set agenda. They come with their objectives, and these don't often align with what's actually needed on the ground. And engaging local communities and farmers don't just mean asking them questions on whether you accept this or not. We don't want to be just throwing or expecting them to accept the technology or bioenergy in this case. We want to ask them how they want to be involved, how what exactly they need, and how they want to be continuously part of the problem, of the solution rather than just think of them as a recipient. They are and supposed to be active participants. And I think this is a good message to say for ASEF participants, because I understand that everyone else is working in this field, and I'm sure many can relate that if you're funded or if a project is driven by an organization that is from outside the community, there's also a problem about what happens after the funding ends. Are you leaving the community to carry it on its own? Did you empower them enough so that they know how to do it after funding is done? And this is a problem anywhere. And I don't think, I think it still continues to happen. And so going back to involving them, what we advocate for, at least in studying social innovation, and that means like engaging people, is to establish a form of collective leadership so that community members are part of it from the start. In terms of financing, it is definitely an issue, and it's probably not just a strategic or approach or organizational approach that needs to be done. There should really be some policy solutions there, because like in Myanmar, when they can't access anything from formal banks, they would access from informal lenders such as traders. We see this in the Philippines too, for example, when we did a study there on rice straw bioenergy, and that would have like higher interest rates, and sometimes like you can't get off from that debt, and it's a chain of problems. So yeah, so other than the organizational solutions on collective leadership and making sure that project implementers, technology developers, farmers, and local communities are involved from the very beginning, definitely policies and institutions have a role to play here.
Thank you, Angela. So we're going to jump into the Q&A session now. And once again, welcome everyone to post their comments or questions for the speakers using the Q&A icon. We do have two questions that have come in from Sokchia. The first one is for Rina, and the question is, Sokchia is from Cambodia. And the first question is, how many, what's the percentage of women that are upskilling in India in the field of clean energy, and what are some of the challenges or problems within this sort of upskilling program, and then also how many like in terms of from the government or the private sector or other sources are contributing to this sort of upskilling agenda? So over to you, Rina.
Thank you, Cindy, and good question. I won't have the exact figures, but we have seen that the accelerated growth of solar and wind in India has resulted into about 1 million skilled workforces across the sector already. And with the target that Indian government has set for renewables coming into the sector is about 450 to 500 gigawatt by 2030, and this figure is expected to cross. For achieving this kind of target, we are looking forward to at least 3 million jobs across the country to be created. And so we have a dedicated ministry for skill development in India, and that ministry works with all sectors, and we have a power sector skill development council in place by the Ministry of Power Government of India, which is supported by the Skill Development Ministry and a Skill Development Council for Green Jobs supported by the industry is also in place in India. So besides several government and private institutions working in this area, I may not have the exact numbers, but can provide one can get from the public documents that are available. But in India, we have seen that almost 20% of the world, that 20% of the world population is in India. And, our youth make an impact not only in India, but also across the world, and where manpower and skills are the key challenges being faced in this fast emerging sector. So going forward, these skilled youth in India can also support the transition that we are looking for, worldwide. So skilling our youth is with the same Indian government has a very ambitious plan of skilling our youth, and it can perhaps double the growth rate and will contribute significantly to the economy globally. And also, lastly, the International Labor Organization has also estimated that India's shift to green economy could add, more than 3 million or 4 million jobs in just renewable energy sectors by 2030. Thank you. So these are the figures I could pull together, and the government has dedicated organizations working on upskilling for this, working towards this transition.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Reena. Yeah, I've read similar statistics where, the move to renewable energy is actually going to create many more jobs because of the many different components and specific aspects that are required in each of these renewable energy systems. So yeah, it's a really, really exciting time ahead, I hope. I was just picking up on the jobs theme. I want to go to Tom, and in your model city, Tom, like will people require reskilling, new skills? How are you accounting for the different range of technical and professional skills that would be needed in your model city?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There's basically a whole, I like the word plethora of different roles that are within a community like this. And it will greatly depend on its type and its location. So what we also want to do is to ensure that there's, for example, traditional ways of agriculture and durable good production is preserved. So, for example, in Vietnam, we're studying what's called a traditional cultural village, where baskets are weaved from certain kinds of reeds. And that, by implementing that and using that as a way for production, you get a bit of a shift in what roles are there, and you can actually absorb and stimulate existing roles and existing trades and knowledge and help them to continue. But there is some level of, I wouldn't call it re-education. For example, we're working with the Regenerators Africa group to adjust Orchid City for application in Uganda. And there's been many studies at the roles and practices of the local smallholder farming community. And how can we introduce aspects that will help the regenerative farming to start to become the norm rather than the exception, and to also help to distribute that knowledge as kind of a transition process rather than just slapping on something new. So in different circumstances, you can have different kinds of models. If we create a new city, then we are able to have more control over who we get in and to educate. If we adapt it from an existing situation, it's more of a transition model. Where the model itself will actually adjust to the existing local situations rather than just projecting some kind of idealized situation and forcing everyone to comply to it. So there's that dynamic, which also then, of course, we're already work with the local population from the very start. So to inform what the practices will be going forward.
Okay, thanks, Tom. I'm going to go to another question from our audience. This one is from Melody, and her question is, there's a growing trend here in the Philippines of women going into farming and have been looking into the use of solar energy in their small farms. Are there institutions we can tap to learn more about this? So I'm not sure if any of the speakers want to put up their hand and answer this question. No? Rena, is that something that you're able to answer from your global networks?
Sorry, I'm just going through the question again. Just give me a second.
Okay, sure. So I'm happy to repeat it. So there's a growing trend here in the Philippines of women going into farming and also looking into the use of solar energies on their small farms. And then are there institutions that they can tap to learn more about how to use solar energy within small farms?
I mean, I wouldn't know, but from India, I've not really studied much about which are the institutions working on this in this space. So maybe somebody, maybe Angela, or they can answer for that.
Hi, yeah. So I guess to start with, I'd be curious to know if they already know where to access those solar energy technologies from. Who provided it. They could always, if women farmers are interested, they could always ask in the first instance their municipal agricultural office. Anyone who, if they're in a form of a cooperative or like a network, they could also, I think that's enough power to talk to someone who knows about, who has a Department of Energy power in their local area. Hopefully someone can support them into starting this initiative. That's from a government perspective. There should be, depending on the area where they are, there should be some organizations that are working around solar energy. But yeah, I can't say a specific now, but I guess a straightforward answer, because every local area would have it, would be their municipal agricultural office and then the Department of Energy in their municipality. And if they don't have any solar energy solutions, then maybe it's like lobby and say, this is something we want and this is something we need. Yeah, it's good that it's coming from women too.
Thanks, Angela. That's some really good words of advice there. We're going to stick with you now, and we've got another question for you. This one is from Nicole, also from the Philippines. What is the current dilemma that biomass, particularly generating energy from rice husk, is facing at the moment? And what measures can be done to mobilize or promote better financing and credit? How can you also promote new concepts and technologies when it comes to biomass within the agricultural sector without compromising the economic stature of farmers?
Right. So I'll start. Sorry, can you repeat the first question so I can
of course, no worries. Yeah. So what are some of the challenges in generating energy from rice husk? And I guess what can also be done to mobilize and promote better financing and credit? And yeah, so let's start with that.
Right, okay. Challenges in terms of generating rice husk, not only in the Philippines, but also in other areas. Generally, turning biomass into modern bioenergy, and that means you don't burn them. You use other technologies such as gasification, for example, that doesn't have as much pollution or emissions than combustion, is very complicated from a collections and transportation perspective and storage. So there's that challenge of logistical. How do you collect, transport, store it so that it's processed? There's also some technological problems, challenges rather, that exist, whether the technology that is in the area is appropriate or has been shaped to fit the local context or the type of biomass that's in the area. So there are challenges, but that is not to say there's no solutions. There are partnerships that have been happening. So say, for example, in the Philippines, one of the projects that we did there was a partnership. One was funded by the UK government. It was turning rice straw, which is another byproduct of agricultural, of rice farming. And it's for anaerobic digestion. So that one, I was a researcher on that project as well. And I obviously I was advocating to like engage farmers from the very beginning and making them updated on the process and how it's going. For rice husk, what we did in rice husk energy generation is happening in Vietnam, in Myanmar, as well as I've mentioned earlier, there are community partnerships. They are using some of the local technologies that are there that involves gasification. Some still do burning. There's a challenge there on tapping into local knowledge and to local technologies and using that to generate energy for what's needed in the local community. In terms of financing, which is it's a big issue. What we've proposed, so depending on the root cost of the issue for Myanmar, if it's we found that it's all the processes where they are in a debt cycle, they end up needing to get money from informal lenders. We think there should be a greater role for policies and institutions to make sure that there's a fair financing scheme, and there's also potential for if the situation is more like you want the community to also generate income from it, a social enterprise or a energy cooperative model could also be explored. So this could earn income for the community members as well when they have all these, when you have this bioenergy technology in place. But yeah, it's dependent on the area, but there are solutions. So one of which is like, as I was saying, for Myanmar, fair financing schemes. They could also take some social enterprise models such as energy cooperative. When we did a study in Vietnam, we thought maybe this is a business model that would fit the community that we worked in there. But again, very much dependent on what the root cause of the problem is, what the community needs, what they can do, what their capacities are already.
Sounds like it does need to be a very tailored approach.
Definitely, yeah. There's no definitely one size. It's not a one size solution for anything.
Okay, thanks, Angela. We have another question that's come in, and I'm going to direct this one to Didi. The question is vulnerability, women, equity, and access of minority communities must indeed be part of the considerations towards energy transition. Importantly, politically and sociological forces on the ground contribute to the success or failure of the energy effort. How do we bridge these gaps in the simplest language understandable by people in communities who live on a hand-to-mouth existence? And this potentially may be our last question for the session, but if anyone, any of the participants would like to post one more, please do so. And this question comes from Marizel. Over to you, Didi, to address that question.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. It's very philosophical question. It's quite a difficult one. I guess like a lot of the intervention that we do in the village level require better understanding not only about the projects that we want to deliver itself, but also about how people in that community lives. We need to understand from the perspective of anthropological point of view, social and the culture as well. We from the project that we run in Sumba, we learned a lot that those are some of the barriers that can actually prevent our projects to be mobilizing in the village. In these particular projects, we somehow miss one anthropological point during the study, that some of the minority groups already, they still practicing what we call traditional religion. And within their house, they have areas that dedicated for their ancestors. So when we actually predict the sizing cable for the houses, we miss that perspective. And recently we just learned that we need to extend the cables and avoid those areas because they don't want cables or lights to be posted in that area. So I think it's in regard to energy transitioning, especially providing energy access at the village level, it has more challenge because we are not only providing energy, we need to understand the community needs. We need to understand their cultures and also how they live in order to provide the best interventions that they need. I think one of the speakers mentioned that at the end of the day, when the funding ends and we are moving away from the village, we need to make sure that the project's sustainable and people knows how to use and utilize this technology for their own benefit and for improving their livelihood in general. So I guess that would be my perspective on these questions.
Cindy, can I add to that? I just wanted a few points from India. So, in India, 99% of the households are now electrified, and that has made a huge difference in the life of the poorest to poor people in the country. And also, we have added cooking gas connections to millions of households in past 10 years. And now that the effort is to provide clean electricity and make it available 24/7, and electricity being the cleanest fuel. And at the user end, we are also promoting electric cooking, at the ground level. So these are some of the efforts that we are trying to do to, one, ensure that people have access to electricity, which is the basic necessity for all the household activities, and also trying to promote, the clean energy access and usability at, the ground level. And there are several government schemes are also available, which are promoting this effort. And a lot of social organizations are working in the rural areas in India to help the vulnerable communities in India. So that's my take on it.
Thank you, Rina. So I think it looks like we're out of time now. So I want to thank the speakers quickly. And it's been my pleasure to moderate the session today. I'm going to now hand back to Ananya for a very quick closing remark.
Sorry, thank you very much. Thank you, Cindy. And thank you also to Angela, Rina, Tom, and Didi today, and to all who joined this session and contributed to the discussion. I encourage you all to continue the conversation in the discussion group, Energy and Gender, or in the networking section of the virtual platform. There are also several ATP publications available on our website or on the virtual platform relating to gender, decent work, role of renewable energy projects in supporting poverty reduction, and many others related to the discussion. If you are interested in any specific information on what ADB is doing, please, I encourage you to find Cindy Tianco in the networking session. She's the Principal Energy Specialist with the Pacific Department. So I wish you a productive and enjoyable rest of the forum. And thank you once again for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.